This kid stole a valuable part from a luxury car, but when the millionaire owner arrives to sort things out, he's moved when he hears her say she stole it to get money for food. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The sun hadn't yet risen over Charleston, South Carolina, when Lily, a small 6-year-old girl, woke up with a stomachache from hunger. Her big brown eyes watched her grandmother, June, 65, who was sleeping curled up beside her under the awning of a closed store. They hadn't had enough food for 3 days since they lost everything in the fire that destroyed their small house. June had been coughing all night, her tan skin paler than usual. The girl gently touched her grandmother's face, feeling it hot with fever. "Grandma, wake up. Are you okay?" Lily whispered, but June only stirred slightly without waking. The historic downtown area of Charleston was slowly coming to life. The first rays of sunlight illuminated the cobblestone streets and the old colonial buildings. Lily got up slowly, trying not to wake her grandmother. Her bare feet touched the cold ground as she watched the shopkeepers beginning to open their stores. The aroma of fresh bread from the bakery made her stomach rumble even louder. The night before, the baker had given them a day-old loaf, but it wasn't enough for 2 people. June had insisted that her granddaughter eat most of it. That's when Lily saw something that caught her eye. An imposing black Rolls-Royce Phantom, parked in front of the Colonial Cafe, the most traditional establishment in the city. The car gleamed in the rising sunlight, its chrome parts shining like diamonds, the same stones that made the region famous in the past. Without thinking twice, driven by hunger and the despair of seeing her grandmother sick, Lily approached the luxurious vehicle. Her little hands trembled as she identified a decorative chrome piece on the side of the car. With a quick tug, she managed to remove it. What Lily didn't know was that Theodore Albright, a 68-year-old man known as the biggest real estate tycoon in the region, was watching everything from inside the cafe. His piercing blue eyes, framed by neatly trimmed gray hair, didn't miss a single movement of the girl. Theodore saw when Lily ran down the cobblestone street, holding the stolen piece to her chest. Instead of calling the authorities, something compelled him to follow the girl. With silent steps, he kept his distance as she walked through the historic alleys of Charleston. After a few blocks, Lily stopped in front of a shady-looking guy who used to buy things without asking questions. With tears in her eyes, she handed over the chrome piece in exchange for a few dollars. Enough, perhaps, to buy a loaf of bread and some fever medicine. It was at that moment that Theodore decided to reveal himself. "Hey, kid," he called out with his deep, commanding voice. Lily froze when she recognized the man from the Rolls-Royce. Her legs trembled, but she didn't run. "I'm sorry, sir," she said with a choked voice. "I stole it to eat." The sincerity of that child hit Theodore like a punch in the stomach. He looked at her bare feet, her dirty and torn dress, her face marked by hunger. "Where are your parents?" he asked, softening his tone. "I don't have parents," Lily replied. "I live with my grandma, but she's sick. We lost everything in the fire last week in the Palmetto village." Theodore's face paled when he heard the name of the place. Something in his expression changed, as if a shadow had crossed his eyes. He knew that fire well, perhaps more than he wanted to. "Take me to your grandmother," he asked, giving the money back to the fence and recovering the piece from his car. Lily led Theodore to the awning where June was still sleeping, now shivering with fever. The businessman knelt beside the woman, ignoring the fact that his Italian linen pants were getting dirty on the ground. "Mom," he called out gently, touching June's shoulder. She opened her eyes slowly, startled to see that elegant man beside her. "Don't be afraid. I want to help you." "We don't need charity," June replied with difficulty, coughing afterward. "It's not charity," Theodore said firmly. "It's a debt I need to pay. Come with me. You'll stay at my house until you recover." as he helped June to her feet, supporting her on his arm. Theodore had no idea that that impulsive decision would forever change not only the life of that grandmother and her granddaughter, but also his own solitary existence in the Albright mansion. What he also didn't know was that June, even in her feverish state, had recognized his name and held deep in her memory an old story that connected their families in a way that Theodore could never suspect. On that Thursday morning, as the sun finished rising over the historic streets of Charleston, three destinies became intertwined irreversibly. And in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, as she watched the cobblestone streets passing by the window, Lily held tight to her grandmother's hot, feverish hand, without imagining that that wouldn't be the last time an Albright would completely change the course of their lives. The Albright mansion was an imposing 19th-century building with its stone walls and tall windows that seemed to watch the city below. When the Rolls-Royce passed through the wrought iron gates, Lily pressed her face against the glass, marveling at the impeccable garden filled with red and white roses. Zelda, the 72-year-old housekeeper, waited at the main door with her rigid posture and impeccably pressed uniform. Her white hair was tied in a perfect bun, and her eyebrows arched when she saw the two strangers getting out of her boss's car. "Mr. Albright, we weren't expecting," she began, but was interrupted. "Zelda, prepare the guest room on the second floor," Theodore ordered, "and call Dr. Vincent immediately. Mrs. June needs medical attention." The housekeeper hesitated for a moment, her dark eyes studying the newcomers with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. In 35 years working for the Albrights, she had never seen her boss bring strangers home, much less people in that condition. As they climbed the marble stairs, June staggered, being supported by Theodore. Lily held onto the hem of her grandmother's dress, her big eyes running over every detail of the luxurious decor. Huge paintings on the walls showed serious people in formal poses. They were the ancestors of the Albrights, all with the same penetrating gaze as Theodore. In the guest room, with its king-size bed and French silk curtains, June was settled between soft sheets that smelled of lavender. Her forehead was burning with fever, and she muttered disjointed words. Lily sat beside her grandmother, holding her hand tightly. "Grandma, everything's going to be okay now," the girl whispered, but her eyes showed concern. Dr. Vincent arrived in 15 minutes. He was a 65-year-old man, a close friend of Theodore and the family doctor for decades. After examining June, his diagnosis was serious, advanced pneumonia aggravated by the days exposed to the elements. "She needs antibiotics and plenty of rest," the doctor explained, "but mostly she needs constant care. In the condition she was in, a few more days and—" He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood the seriousness of the situation. Theodore ordered Zelda to provide everything necessary for the treatment. In the days that followed, while June slowly recovered, Lily began to explore the mansion. Her natural curiosity and intelligence soon caught the attention of the staff. The little girl asked questions about everything, from the paintings on the walls to the workings of the old Italian coffee machine that was in the kitchen. It was in the kitchen that she found her first refuge. Zelda, despite her stern appearance, had a soft spot for children. Little by little, she began to allow Lily to help her with small tasks like sorting the silver cutlery or folding the linen napkins. "Girl, you have delicate hands for this work," the housekeeper commented one afternoon, watching how Lily meticulously organized the Chinese porcelain cups. But it wasn't just Zelda who was changing with the girl's presence. Theodore, known for his inflexible routine and distant behavior, began to have his meals in the kitchen, something unthinkable before. He found himself watching Lily, fascinated with her ability to find joy in the simplest things. One morning, while he was having his coffee, he heard the girl humming an old Charlestonian song that his late wife, Beatrice, used to sing. It hit, him like a lightning bolt, bringing back memories that he had kept locked away for years. On the 10th day at the mansion, when June was already stronger, she began to insist that they needed to leave. "We've taken advantage of Mr. Albright's kindness too much," she told Lily. But Theodore didn't want them to leave. Something in that girl had awakened long dormant feelings in him. "Mrs. June," he said that night, "I'd like to make you a proposal. I need a new cook, and I've noticed that you have a talent for cooking." It was true. In the last few days, even while still recovering, June had prepared some typical southern dishes that impressed everyone. Her shrimp and grits and her collard greens were small culinary works of art. June hesitated. Working for the Albrights. That name carried a weight that only she knew, a story buried decades ago in the depths of her memory. But looking at Lily, who finally had a roof over her head and food on the table, she had no choice. "I accept, Mr. Albright," she replied, "but with one condition. I want Lily to be able to study." Theodore not only agreed but arranged for Lily's enrollment in the best private school in Charleston the next day. The girl got new uniforms, school supplies, and even a pink backpack that she couldn't stop admiring. What no one knew was that while organizing the mansion's kitchen, June had found an old box full of documents at the back of a cupboard. Among papers yellowed with time, she recognized something that made her heart stop, a land deed with her father's name, dated 1975. That accidental discovery began to awaken memories that June had struggled to forget. Memories of a time of severe recession when many families in the area, including hers, were forced to sell their land for paltry sums. Land that years later proved to be incredibly valuable real estate. At night, after everyone was asleep, June quietly returned to the kitchen. With trembling hands, she examined document after document, putting together a puzzle that revealed a painful truth. The Albright fortune had been built on the suffering of families like hers. But another document, hidden among the others, caught her attention in a particular way. It was an old letter, never sent, written by Theodore to his son August. The contents of that letter made June pale. That same night, while June was discovering secrets of the past in the silent kitchen, a black car was driving down the road that connected Atlanta to Charleston. At the wheel was August Albright, 42, who had just received an anonymous call informing him of the presence of 2 intruders in his father's mansion. His green eyes, identical to his father's, sparkled with a mixture of anger and worry. Beside him, his wife Cynthia was sleeping, unaware that she was about to become involved in a plot much more complex than any of her anthropological research could predict. The mansion's clock struck midnight. Lily stirred in her bed, dreaming of angels with golden wings. Theodore, in his office, contemplated an old photograph of his late wife. And June, with trembling hands, held a document that could change the destiny of everyone in that house. In the letter she had just read, Theodore confessed to August something he had never revealed to anyone. The real reason why he had bought that land so many years ago, and an even bigger secret about June's family that not even she knew. The day hadn't even dawned when the roar of a black Porsche Cayenne's engine cut through the silence of the Albright mansion. August got out of the car, slamming the door shut, while Cynthia followed him, trying to calm him down. The aristocratic face of the Albright heir was twisted in an expression of contained fury. "August, for God's sake, it's 5 in the morning, Cynthia whispered, her brown eyes begging for common sense. "Let's wait a few hours." But August was already ringing the doorbell insistently. Zelda, still adjusting her uniform hastily, opened the door with her eyes wide with surprise. "Mr. August, Mrs. Cynthia, we weren't expecting—" "Where's my father?" August interrupted, entering the mansion like a hurricane. The noise woke Lily, who was sleeping in the room next to her grandmother's. The girl got up curiously and walked to the hallway, where she found Theodore already dressed, coming down the stairs to greet the son he hadn't seen in 2 years. "Son, What a surprise! Theodore began, but was brutally interrupted. Surprise? The surprise is mine, Dad. Who are these people you've brought to our house? Have you lost your mind? Lily shrank back upon hearing the shouts, but something in Theodore's expression changed when he saw the girl at the top of the stairs. His posture became firmer, his voice more decisive. Lower your voice, August. There's a child in the house. It was then that August saw Lily. For a moment his face softened as he found those big brown eyes that were watching him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. But soon his expression hardened again. That's exactly what I came to talk about. You're being manipulated. Two strangers appear out of nowhere and you take them in. Have you thought they might be scammers? Cynthia, who until then had been watching the scene in silence, finally intervened. As an anthropologist, she was used to seeing beyond appearances, to seeking to understand the stories behind people. August, let's at least hear what your father has to say, she asked, her eyes already fixed on Lily, who was now timidly coming down the stairs. At that moment, June emerged from her room. Even though she was still recovering from pneumonia, her presence had a natural dignity that silenced everyone. She walked down the stairs slowly, leaning on the banister. "If you consider us intruders," she said, addressing August, "we'll leave immediately. We didn't come here to cause trouble." But before anyone could answer, a new figure entered the scene. Marvin, Theodore's trusted manager, arrived at the mansion, out of breath. "Mr. Albright, forgive the intrusion, but we need to talk urgently. It's about the company." Theodore's face paled. For weeks, he had been hiding from everyone the serious crisis his company was facing. The real estate market was plummeting, the creditors were pressing, and there was something even worse that not even he knew, something Marvin had been hiding for months. "Let's go to the office," Theodore said, gesturing for August to follow him. While the men went to the office, Cynthia approached Lily and June. There was something about that grandmother and granddaughter that intrigued her deeply. "Are you really from Charleston?" she asked June. "I was born in the old field area," June replied, and something in her voice made Cynthia shudder. As an anthropologist, she had extensively studied that region, known for land disputes during the big recession of the 70s. In the office, the tension was palpable. Marvin, sweating profusely, explained the situation to Theodore and August. "The latest projections were disastrous. There aren't enough housing sales to sustain the operation. And there's more." Marvin hesitated, his round face shining with sweat. It was August who completed. "The loans we took out to expand operations. The interest rates are killing us." Theodore sank into his leather chair. His empire, built over decades, was crumbling, but there was something in Marvin's behavior that bothered him. The manager seemed more nervous than usual, especially when they mentioned the old field area. In the kitchen, June was preparing breakfast, as if nothing had happened. Her experienced hands kneaded the biscuit dough while her mind worked. The night before, in addition to the letter, she had found something even more disturbing, a report on the fire in Palmetto Village. Lily, sitting at the kitchen table with Cynthia, was drawing in a new notebook she had won from Theodore. Her drawings showed a house on fire, and that caught the anthropologist's attention. "What is this drawing, Lily?" "It's our old house," the girl replied without lifting her eyes from the paper. "On the day of the fire, a man visited us. He was wearing a grey suit and had a very nice gold watch." June dropped the biscuit pan. She remembered that man. And now, seeing Marvin in the office through the kitchen door, she recognized the same gold watch on his wrist. At that moment, Irene, a former employee of Theodore's company, was crossing the gates of the mansion. She had been fired months ago after questioning certain practices of the company. But it wasn't just that brought her back. Seeing June through the kitchen window, her eyes filled with tears. "Aunt June," she whispered, incredulous. Irene's shout crossed the garden, making everyone turn to the door. June, seeing the niece she hadn't seen in decades, felt her legs weaken. The two women hugged, crying, while the others watched the scene astonished. "You're alive!" Irene sobbed. "We all thought you had died in the flood of '85. But the joy of the reunion was interrupted when Marvin, hurrying out of the office, bumped into a table, knocking over his briefcase. Documents were scattered on the floor, and among them, an old photo fell at June's feet. The photo showed a group of men in front of a family home, June's old house in the old field area. Among them was a younger Marvin next to Theodore's father, and in their hands a sales contract. Time seemed to freeze. June picked up the photo with trembling hands, her eyes fixed on a detail that only she could recognize. In the corner of the image, partially visible, there was a mark on the wall of the house. The same mark that she had seen on the wall of her house in Palmetto Village moments before the fire. "Mr. Marvin," she said with a voice that didn't seem like hers, "do you have something to tell me about the fire that destroyed my house?" The silence that followed was deafening. Theodore, who had just left the office, looked at his trusted manager with an expression of incomprehension. August paled, and Cynthia, the anthropologist who had studied so many land disputes, began to piece together a puzzle much larger than everyone imagined. The silence in the Albright mansion was broken by the sound of hurried footsteps. Marvin, with a livid face, tried to escape towards the door, but August stopped him. "Not so fast," said Theodore's son, his voice trembling slightly. "I think we all need to hear this story." June remained standing, holding the old photograph so tightly that her fingers were white. Lily approached her grandmother, instinctively sensing her anguish. Irene, still processing the unexpected reunion with her aunt, began to speak. "Aunt June, when I was fired from the company, it wasn't for incompetence as they said. I found documents about irregular operations on the lands of Palmetto Village." Theodore, who until then had been watching the scene in shock, turned to Marvin. "What is she talking about?" The manager, cornered, let out a nervous laugh. "Mr. Albright, it's not like that at all. I can explain." But Cynthia, who had stood up, interrupted. "Maybe I can help explain. During my research on land disputes in Charleston, I discovered an interesting pattern. Several properties that belonged to traditional families in the region were acquired by the Albright Company in suspicious circumstances." Theodore staggered, needing to lean on a chair. His face was as pale as wax. "Marvin has been my trusted manager for 30 years. He's taken care of all the operational stuff since I reduced my participation in the company." "And that's exactly what he took advantage of, Mr. Albright," Irene said, taking a folder from her bag. "Here's the proof. The subsidiary that bought the lands of Palmetto Village was illegally dumping toxic waste from the construction. When the residents started questioning the strange smell and the contaminated water, the fire happened," June completed, her voice full of painful understanding. Lily, who was absorbing everything with her attentive child's eyes, suddenly pointed to Marvin. "Grandma, the watch. It's the same as the man who was at our house that day." Marvin's face twisted into an expression of panic. He tried again to escape, but this time it was Theodore who stopped him, his voice thundering through the room. "Marvin, you're going to explain everything. Now." The manager collapsed into an armchair, defeated. "It was all Mr. August's idea," he said, looking at Theodore's son. "He wanted to increase profits during his absence from management." All eyes turned to August, who had turned as white as paper. Cynthia moved away from her husband, horrified. "August, you didn't," she began, but couldn't finish. "I never authorized a fire," August protested, running his hands through his hair in despair. "Yes, I knew about the waste deposits. We needed to cut costs. The company was sinking. But I never ever imagined that Marvin would go that far." Theodore staggered again, now struck by a sharp pain in his chest. Zelda ran to support him while Cynthia was already grabbing the phone to call an ambulance. Amid the chaos that ensued, Lily approached Theodore, holding his hand delicately. "Don't get sick, Mr. Theodore. Who's going to take me to school?" Those innocent words, amid so many painful revelations, brought tears to the businessman's eyes. While they waited for the ambulance, June prepared a chamomile tea, her hands trembling as she served the drink. In the hospital, hours later, the diagnosis was severe. Theodore had suffered a minor heart attack caused by stress. While he recovered in the room, June remained by his side, surprising everyone. "Why are you still here?" Theodore asked with a weak voice. "After everything." "My company did, because I've learned that revenge only brings more pain," June replied, adjusting his pillow, "and because Lily has become attached to you. She's never had a grandfather." In the waiting room, August faced his own judgment. Cynthia refused to look at him, while Irene organized the documents that would prove all the irregularities. "How could you?" Cynthia finally asked, her voice full of disappointment. "You always criticized your father for being greedy, but you proved to be even worse." August buried his face in his hands. "I wanted to prove that I could make the company grow even more. I wanted my father to be proud of me, even if it cost the lives and dignity of innocent people," Cynthia completed. In the hospital room, Lily had obtained special permission to visit Theodore. She climbed onto the bed and, to everyone's surprise, began to tell a story she had invented. "Once upon a time, there was a very rich king who lived alone in his castle," she began. "He had a lot of gold, but he had no friends, until one day he found a girl and her grandmother who needed help." Theodore listened attentively, silent, tears running down his face. Lily's story, in its childlike simplicity, revealed truths that he had ignored for decades. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Zelda made a disturbing discovery while tidying up Marvin's office. Hidden in a false bottom of the drawer, she found a pen drive with information that would make the situation even more complex. The pen drive contained emails and documents that proved that Marvin had not only orchestrated the fire in Palmetto Village, but had also been embezzling money from the company for years. The debts that were suffocating the Albright company were, in large part, the result of his financial manipulations. When Zelda brought this information to the hospital, it was Cynthia who first understood the gravity of the situation. As an anthropologist, she had studied similar cases of corporate corruption, but had never imagined finding something like that so close to home. "We need to act fast," she said, assuming a decisive posture that surprised everyone. "The company may be bankrupt, but there's still time to do the right thing." That night, while Theodore slept under sedation, an improvised meeting took place in his hospital room. June, Cynthia, August and Irene discussed how to proceed. "The lands of Palmetto Village need to be returned to the families," declared Irene, "and not just those, all the properties acquired irregularly." August, who had spent the last few hours reflecting on his actions, surprised everyone by agreeing. "I'll take responsibility. I can't undo what happened, but I can try to fix it." June watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. In her hands, she still held the old photo that had triggered all that revelation. But there was something more in that image, a detail that only she had noticed and that could change everything again. In the corner of the photograph, partially visible through a window of the house, there was a framed document on the wall. Even in the blurred image, June recognized the official seal that her father was so proud of. It was the title deed to the mineral spring that existed on their land. A spring that, according to the stories her father told, had unique medicinal properties. A spring that had been buried during the first excavations of the Albright Mining Company, and whose existence everyone believed to be just a local legend. While everyone was discussing the restitution of the lands and the future of the company, June kept that information to herself. Her heart told her that that wasn't the right time to reveal that secret. First, she needed to be sure. What no one knew was that at that very moment, Lily was playing with a small bottle of crystal clear water that she had found at the back of the mansion's yard, near where her family's old lands bordered the Albright property. A water that, curiously, had made the roses in the garden grow extraordinarily in recent days. The Charleston Winter Festival was approaching, and the historic city was preparing for its biggest annual celebration. The cobblestone streets were decorated with colorful banners, and the aroma of southern delicacies filled the air. But in the Albright mansion, the mood was very different. Theodore had been discharged from the hospital, but he was different, more silent, more reflective. He spent hours in his office, reviewing old documents and making notes in a black-covered notebook. His health still required care, and June had taken responsibility for preparing special meals for him, rich in nutrients and low in fat. "You need to eat right," she said, placing a plate of chicken and rice in front of him. "It's no use just rummaging through old papers." But they weren't just old papers. Theodore was trying to understand how his empire had begun to crumble. The debts were much larger than he imagined, and the discoveries about Marvin's actions had shaken his trust deeply. On a particularly cold morning, Lily ran into the office, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mr. Theodore, come see what I found in the garden." She held a small glass bottle containing crystal clear water. "It's magic. It made the roses grow with it." Theodore watched the bottle curiously, but it was June, who was entering with a tray of tea, who paled upon seeing the water. The bottle slipped from Lily's small hands, breaking on the hardwood floor. "I'm sorry," exclaimed the girl, frightened. "It's okay, honey," said Theodore, but noticed that June was paralyzed, staring at the spilled water. "Mrs. June, are you all right?" he asked, concerned. June quickly composed herself, but her hands were trembling as she cleaned the water. "This water, where did you find it, Lily?" "Back in the garden, Grandma. There's a tiny spring near those big rocks." At that moment, Cynthia entered the office carrying a stack of old books. As an anthropologist, she had immersed herself in research on the history of the region, especially after the revelations about the lands. "I found something interesting," she said, placing the books on the table. Records from 1940 talk about a medicinal spring on the Ribeiro family lands. The Native Americans in the region believed the water had healing powers. June felt her heart race. Ribeiro was her maiden name, and the stories about the spring were part of her childhood memories. "My father always talked about this spring," she said finally. "But when the excavations began, it disappeared. We thought it had dried up. Or it was deliberately buried," added Irene, who had just arrived. She brought more documents found in the company archives. "Look at this." It was a geological report from 1975, the same year the lands were sold. The document indicated the presence of a mineral spring with unique properties, but recommended that the information be kept secret so as not to interfere with the purchase negotiations. "My God," Theodore whispered, running his hands through his gray hair. "I never knew that. My father, he never told me." August, who was watching everything from the door, felt the weight of guilt increase. Not only had he allowed the illegal dumping of waste, but now he was discovering that his family had an even longer history of questionable actions. But it was Lily who, innocently, provoked the greatest revelation of that day. The water made the rose grow huge, and it healed the cut on my finger too. Look. Everyone came closer to see. The small cut Lily had made while playing in the garden the day before had completely disappeared. Cynthia took some of the water that still remained. on the floor in a clean glass. We need to analyze this in a lab. No! Exclaimed June suddenly. This water, it belongs to the people here. It can't become another form of exploitation. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of horns and excited voices coming from the gate of the mansion. A group of long-time residents of the area, having heard about the revelations of the documents found, were protesting in front of the house. "Thieves!" some shouted. "Give back our lands!" Theodore approached the window, watching the crowd. His face showed a mixture of shame and determination. "It's time to do the right thing," he said, picking up his notebook. In the pages there was a detailed plan for the restitution of the lands and restructuring of the company. But now, with the discovery of the spring, everything would need to be rethought. That night, as the mansion finally quieted down, June made one last visit to the spring. Under the moonlight, the water sprang crystal clear between the stones, as if it had waited decades to be rediscovered. A noise made her turn around. It was Marvin, who had managed to enter the property stealthily. "Don't think it's going to be that easy," he said, his voice full of threat. "I have evidence against everyone, including your precious Theodore." But Marvin wasn't counting on one thing. Zelda, who had always distrusted him, had followed him there. The housekeeper had discreetly triggered the security system. When Marvin tried to flee, he slipped on the wet stones and fell. From his pocket, a pen drive fell, the same one that contained all the evidence of his illegal activities. As Marvin was taken away by security, Theodore appeared in the garden, leaning on a cane. His eyes filled with tears upon seeing the spring. "Mrs. June," he said with a choked voice, "now I understand why my father never told me about the spring. He knew I wouldn't agree with what he did." June looked at the man who, despite all the mistakes of the past, had welcomed her and Lily when they needed it most. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we need to lose everything to find what really matters." The next day, during the Charleston Winter Festival, the whole city was commenting on the news. The local newspapers were headlining about the discovery of the legendary spring and the revelations about the past of the Albright Company. But something even bigger was about to happen. In the mansion's library, Theodore found documents that his father had hidden, revealing that the lands where the spring was located had never been legally transferred. A special clause in the contract, written in small print, guaranteed that the ownership of the spring would remain with the Ribeiro family. This discovery could change everything. But when Theodore was preparing to reveal this information to June, a smell of smoke invaded the mansion. August, in one last desperate act to hide the evidence of the company's illegal actions, had set fire to the library. The flames spread rapidly through the historic mansion, while Lily, who was playing on the second floor, screamed for help. What would happen next would forever change the fate of everyone in the Albright mansion. The flames consumed the Albright mansion's library with frightening voracity. The smell of smoke and burning paper spread through all the rooms, while Lily's desperate cries echoed from the second floor. "My granddaughter!" June cried, trying to climb the stairs, but being held back by Zelda. The smoke was too dense. It was then that August, the man who had started the fire in a moment of despair, realized the extent of what he had done. Without thinking twice, he ran upstairs, disappearing into the smoke screen. "August, no!" Cynthia shouted, but it was too late. The minutes that followed seemed like an eternity. Theodore, still weak from his recovery, held June's hand, both paralyzed with fear. The sound of the fire truck's sirens approached, but seemed too distant. Then, like a miracle in the midst of the chaos, August emerged from the smoke, carrying Lily in his arms. Both were covered in soot, coughing violently, but alive. In that moment of extreme danger, something had changed inside Theodore's son. "Forgive me, Dad," he said between fits of coughing, placing Lily in June's arms. I almost... He couldn't finish the sentence, collapsing on the floor. The firefighters arrived in time to save part of the mansion, but the library was completely destroyed. With it, apparently, all the evidence of the old documents had been lost, or so they thought. The diary, Lily whispered suddenly, still in her grandmother's arms. I took Mr. Theodore's diary before the fire. From inside her soot-stained pajamas, the girl pulled out a black-covered notebook, the same one where Theodore had noted his restitution plans and the truth about the spring. That night changed everything. August, deeply affected by having almost caused a tragedy, confessed everything. His participation in Marvin's schemes, the knowledge about the toxic waste, every wrong decision he had made trying to prove his worth. In the hospital, where August was hospitalized for smoke inhalation, Cynthia held his hand while he cried like a child. I wanted so much for my father to be proud of me, he confessed. But I only managed to become everything I always criticized. Theodore, who was watching his son from the door of the room, felt his heart clench. How many mistakes had been made out of pride, out of greed, out of lack of dialogue. In the weeks that followed, a series of events completely transformed everyone's lives. The creditors, who were already pressuring the Albright Company, executed the hidden debts that Marvin had contracted. The mansion and practically all the assets were auctioned off. It was June, ironically, who offered shelter to the Albright family. With the money she had saved working at the mansion, she managed to rent a simple but cozy house in downtown Charleston. It's not a mansion, she said, opening the door to Theodore, August, and Cynthia, but there's enough space for everyone. Seeing Theodore Albright, the former real estate tycoon, learning to live in a simple house was a lesson in humility. He who always had employees for everything now learned to make coffee, wash dishes, perform everyday tasks that he never imagined he would need to do. But it was in that simplicity that he discovered something precious: true family living. For the first time in decades, he sat at the table to have dinner with everyone, listened to the stories that Lily invented, participated in the simple conversations of everyday life. Are you sad for having lost everything? Lily asked one night, sitting next to him on the small porch. Theodore smiled, a smile different from what he used to give, more sincere, lighter. No, little one. I think I'm only now finding what really matters. It was at that moment that Irene arrived with news that would once again change everyone's destiny. After months of investigation and analysis, she had obtained irrefutable evidence about the mineral spring. The laboratory analyses confirmed it, she said, spreading reports on the kitchen table. The water has unique medicinal properties. And more, I found the original property documents in a registry office in Colombia. The documents proved that the spring and the land around it still legally belonged to June's family. The special clause that Theodore had discovered before the fire really existed, and official copies were registered in the registry office. But I don't want this land just for me, declared June, surprising everyone. I have a different proposal. Her plan was simple and revolutionary. Create a cooperative that would include all the families that had been harmed over the years, including the Albrights, now as equal partners. Cynthia, with her academic contacts, helped develop a sustainable project for the bottling and distribution of mineral water. August, using his experience in business management, now ethically, contributed to strategic planning. The water from the spring, which the ancients called redemption water, began to be marketed. The profits were divided equally among the cooperative members, and part was reinvested in the community. Theodore, who had always been known for his stubbornness and introversion, discovered a new vocation as a counselor for the cooperative. His experience in business, now used for the common good, helped to transform the enterprise into a successful model. But the greatest transformation happened in personal relationships. August and Cynthia rebuilt their marriage on new, more honest, and egalitarian foundations. Theodore and his son finally learned to talk, to express their feelings, to ask for and offer forgiveness. Zelda, who had decided to stay with the family even without receiving a salary, was now treated as part of it. Her culinary skills became a separate attraction in the cooperative store, where she sold southern treats along with the mineral water. And Lily, the little girl who had stolen a car part to get food, became the official storyteller of the cooperative. Her first children's book, The Magic Water of Charleston, inspired by the stories her grandmother told about her ancestors, became a regional success. One autumn afternoon, exactly 1 year after the fire that had changed their lives, everyone gathered for lunch in the backyard of the simple house. The table was full of southern foods prepared by June and Zelda. Theodore, sitting between August and Lily, watched the scene with teary eyes. "You know, Lily," he said, taking the girl's hand, "that day you took the part from my car, it was the day I started to really live." June, serving a plate of shrimp and grits, smiled at those words. The spring that her ancestors so valued had really brought healing, not only through its medicinal waters, but through the transformations it caused in all of them. The spring water continues to gush, clear and crystal clear in Charleston. On the walls of the cooperative's headquarters, an old photo shows June as a child next to her father, both smiling in front of the spring. Next to it, a new photo shows the whole family together, Albrights, Ribeiros, and so many others, proving that sometimes it is necessary to lose everything to find something much more valuable, the true meaning of family, forgiveness, and redemption. And Lily, well, she continues to invent stories, but now she knows that none of them is as extraordinary as the real story she lived. The story of how a stolen part from a luxury car ended up uniting destinies, healing old wounds, and transforming an entire city.